Hello and welcome to Henry Weston's Old Mate the podcast. I am, of course, Stuart, and today we're going back into the greenkeeping turf side of things. I am joined by my guest, Jeff Stahman, over in the US of A. Before we get into introducing Jeff, please just like, rate and review the show. If you're watching us on YouTube, drop the video a like, subscribe to the channel, share across all your social medias. Don't forget that the podcast now has a Buy Me a Coffee page set up. If you go on to www.buymeacoffee.com, search HWOM, you can support the podcast in a very small way. As I always say, the content will always be free, but if you want to support us, we will happily accept your support. On to my guest, Jeff. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh, really good. No, thank you so much for coming on. You reached out to me after I sort of had a chat with some fellow Americans, shall I say, and you reached out and said you'd be happy to come on. And behind the scenes, we've been planning a chat, so we've got a direction. We're going to get to know you a little bit, Jeff, and then we're going to move on to talking through your career within turf that is now still within the turf industry, but you've moved out of the actual day-to-day golf course side of things and made a very brave and risky move to create and start your own business, which is commendable on many fronts. Before we get onto that side of things, introduce us to yourself. Talk us through your sort of growing up, and then we'll get into how you ended up in the turf industry, Jeff.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Boise, Idaho, which is kind of the northwest corner of the United States. Lived in the same house my whole life. Have an older sister. My parents were both attorneys. My sister is an attorney, so I guess I'd be the black sheep of the family. So when I grew up, I said I wanted to be an attorney because you obviously look up to your parents, but
yeah,
it didn't work out. It's just not something that really piqued my interest as I became an adult. I graduated from high school, went on to go to this small liberal arts school right outside of my hometown. And I kept changing majors. I just never really figured out what I wanted to do. And when I grew up, my dad took me golfing at a very young age, maybe 8 or 9. We played golf all the time together. And I loved golfing. I loved working outside, loved being outside. So I talked to my parents and said, hey, I want to transfer schools and I want to go into the turf industry and become a golf course superintendent. And they've been very supportive of it. It's obviously not what they did, but so I transferred schools. I went to Kansas State University for their golf course management program. And people ask me why I chose that because there was pretty good turf programs by Idaho, but Kansas State had business minor as part of the requirement, and it's obviously coming into use now. Obviously, as a superintendent, there's a lot of business decisions you need to make. So taking the accounting, finance, business side of things, I thought was very important. So that's why I chose that. I worked in a lot of different places, even got to work out of country. I did a study abroad in New Zealand for a little bit, volunteered at some golf courses over there, did some research, worked in the Cayman Islands.
Okay.
That's where our first kid was born.
Oh, wow.
And having a child in the Cayman Islands is quite expensive. So we then moved back to the United States in Utah. Went from Utah as an assistant superintendent and took a head job in Oregon. Was then terminated from that job. So we chose a town in Eastern Washington, Kennewick, and I worked for a retail store, Lowe's, for a little bit, just as a horticultural specialist there. And then I went on to work with the school district and a city parks department. And when I was with the school district, then I started Turfmend.
Okay, so Turfmend is where you're at now, but let's just go back to the beginning a little bit. You mentioned, or you identified that you wanted to be a turf superintendent at a young age. that is, I think, over your side of the world, that is a bit more of a sort of identifiable career path. Over here, we don't get many. We don't have turf school as such. You know, we tend to gain our qualifications through distance learning once you're in the industry, so to speak. I mean, there are at Birmingham University, there is a sort of a golf course management degree that I know of, but it's not really focused on the agronomic side of things. It's more, you know, director of golf type studies. And back when you were studying, it was still a thriving sort of industry. I mean, we just talked beforehand, and I'm going to ask you for your thoughts now. Obviously, I spoke with Peter McCormick a few weeks ago on some slightly different subjects, but he's now running his series sort of entitled "Where Are All the Assistants Gone?" And for those people listening in the UK, an assistant super in America is basically a number two. It's what we would call a deputy head greenkeeper. There's a shortage of assistant supers in the US. So, Jeff, I'm going to ask you just a few thoughts, because I know that you've held that position in a number of golf courses. Could you offer some thoughts as to why potentially people don't want to be assistant supers anymore?
I think there's a lot of reasons, but I think the number of hours that assistant supers are required to work. I mean, when you're working 70, 80 plus hours, it's pretty hard to have a family.
Yeah.
Pretty hard to spend time with your children, and you miss a lot when they're growing up. And then you accompany that with the wages that they're paying. I mean, $30,000-$40,000. You can go work at a McDonald's or Burger King and make fries for that. So I think there's a life balance thing. A lot of them are requiring 4-year degrees, and I think the way you do it over there in terms of apprenticeships and learning on the job.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily believe you need a 4-year degree. I think there's a lot of turf schools now going to 2-year degrees.
Right. Yeah.
I did get a 4-year degree. Whether or not I needed it, I don't think so to be a superintendent. Because for me, I've learned way more working for superintendents and through my own mistakes on the golf course than you obviously learn the science and whatnot at school, but you learn more on the golf course than you do actually going to school. So I think an apprenticeship has a lot of value.
Yeah, and certainly in the UK now, a lot of golf clubs are employing agronomists. So for something that you're saying within your 4-year degree, you will certainly learn the in-depth soil science side of things. Over here, I mean, you can sort of distance learn that as well if you so wish. But really, if you're managing a crew of 10 to 15 to 20 guys over here, you know, you've got a golf course to manage, 18 holes, 36 holes, be it what it is. You've then, you know, why not defer some of the agronomic side to a guy who's going to come in once a month, once every 6 weeks, potentially, and let you know what you're doing right and potentially what you're doing wrong, or what you've not quite got right.
Right.
So yeah, so maybe over there, that sort of 2-year degree is hopefully the way forward. We won't delve into the wages too much. I'll link Peter's chat because we've touched on it. I will link that for anyone who wants to go and catch up on it. I would certainly recommend it. But we're not here to talk about that anymore. We're here to talk about you, Jeff. So you come 2017, you'd left the day-to-day golf side of things. You were working for the Parks and Recreations, I think you said, but you'd set up Turfmend, and that's what I'd like to talk about now. So just talk to me about Turfmend, what it is, and what it does.
So when I left the golf industry, and it wasn't by choice, I was fired. I had a lot of friends in there, and another superintendent at a low budget course called me, and he asked me for my formulation to get divots to heal. And obviously, when you work at a golf course, you mix your own divot mix, and you see other superintendents mixing their divot mix, and you take what you believe is best and you kind of make it your own. And so I gave him my formulation, and he called me back and he's like, "You should sell this stuff." And I was like, "Okay," So me and him originally we joined together, and in August of 2017 we started an LLC, and we put together Turfmend. We originally had another gentleman blend the product for us.
Yeah.
Did it once, didn't work out as well as we were hoping. So fortunately, in May of 2018, we were invited over to Barenbrug, USA, and there's obviously a Barenbrug, UK as well.
Yeah, everyone will be familiar with the brand.
Yeah, great company. They've been supportive from day one, and they liked the idea. The two gentlemen that met with us were, one was a former superintendent, one was an assistant. So they saw the need for it. They understood the time savings, the labor savings, and obviously if we can use their seed, it gets their product in more people's hands. And so our first product was sand, peat moss, grass seed.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty simple, but not as simple as I thought to package it. I mean, when you're making something in the field, you don't worry about too much moisture or whether or not the seed's going to germinate. You don't worry about the packaging, whether there's going to be enough breathing holes so the seed won't go bad. And so we made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
Had too much peat moss, had seed germinate. We had fancy packages for retail, didn't have enough breathing holes, had a bunch of seed go bad. But you live and learn, right? And Barenbrug's been there to support me anytime I made a mistake. And they were always there to back me up and say, "Hey, it's part of learning. And if you're not learning, if you're not making mistakes, you're not learning." And I feel very fortunate that I've worked with Barenbrug. And then obviously my wife, without the support of your spouse, which obviously she supports your podcast and your career, if you don't have the good support of your spouse, you'll never be successful. And when I got fired from the golf course industry, you just kind of at a loss because you worked your whole life to get to be a superintendent. Then you just get, one day it's taken away from you, right?
Yeah.
So, I was pretty depressed. I gained some weight, was eating, was really not myself. And one thing she said to me once I started the business, she's like, "I don't care if you make money or not." She's like, "You're happy again." And to have that support just makes you push that much harder because you have the support of your spouse. So Amy's, she's been there from day one, and I definitely have a very great wife. Pretty fortunate.
That is, if we're all, fortunate enough to, I'm fortunate enough to have the support of, my wife and my family, and obviously people who've listened to other aspects of my podcast. I've had a few ups and downs in the past. It's sort of addiction, anxiety-based problems. So everyone, needs that support. And if you're potentially, not married, but if it's not a wife, hopefully if you've got friends or your parents or colleagues or ex-colleagues, that support, you can't underestimate how important it is. And certainly for you, Jeff, moving or making that huge decision. Well, the decision to leave the golf course industry wasn't one you made. Obviously, you've just explained that was made for you, sadly. But I want to sort of delve a little bit into the mindset of then the huge risk of starting a business, because I would imagine it would have been quite easy to fall back on your turf background and move into either another role within golf or potentially a role within sales for someone else that would have guaranteed a salary. But you didn't choose that. You took the risk. So talk us through the process. Obviously, you had the idea. You had an idea for this divot mix, and it worked. But how many days or how many hours did you toil over in your mind? Am I brave enough to make this decision? You had the backing of your wife. We know you've got kids. Was it always a decision, I'm going to do this, or was there that moment where you thought, I'm potentially risking it all here?
I mean, I guess I was fortunate where I had a job in the school district, and then I switched over to the parks department where it was a 40-hour a week job. It was, they were union jobs, so you had the same lunch, you had the same hours. It's not like a golf course job where you might work 12 hours one day, 16 hours the next. So I was able to plan my days where I could have meetings in the morning, and being on the West Coast, I could meet with people on the East Coast in the morning. And then when I got home, I could meet with people on the West Coast. So I could plan my day. And so I kind of built it as a side gig for quite a while. And, last year and during the pandemic, I know a lot of businesses struggled, but the golf industry took off because people got outside.
Yeah.
And they realized the value of exercise, and that it really helped my business. And it's sad to see all the businesses that failed, but for me, last year my business grew at almost 5 times, and a lot of that was Peter McCormick. He convinced me to get onto Twitter. He also was very generous in giving us some free ad space on Turfnet. I had the help of another company called Green County Fertilizer. He helped me to rebrand, get a new logo, get a new slogan. And we did that right pretty much at the start of the pandemic. So I've had a lot of people help me become successful. And without that, we wouldn't be here. And without Peter saying, Jeff, get on Twitter, let me help you out, I would not have been able to quit my job, 5 months ago, move my country across pretty much 2,200 miles away, and live in Indiana, and start doing this full time. So
you were Washington based, and you've just said you've moved 2,200 miles, which where I am in the UK, if I moved 2,200 miles anywhere, I'd end up in the sea. But does that?
I'm gonna do that.
So did you moved, and you moved, but you retain, how does it work? You were able to retain sort of previous customers, or have you moved to a whole new customer base, or is it all shipped out? So moving to Indiana, you're more central now. So that just makes life easier.
Yeah, it makes life easier because, where we chose, we're just driving, we're 2 hours from a lot of big areas. Like you interviewed Paul, and he's just 2 hours from me in St. Louis.
Okay.
We're 2 hours from Nashville. We're 2 hours from Cincinnati, 2 hours from Indianapolis. We're 5 hours from Chicago. So it's very, very central. And it's allowed me to now focus my full energy. And I got substantially more distributors now. This time last year, I think I had distributors selling in maybe 5 states.
Yeah.
Now 42 states. And we're about to sign another company, which is going to get us distribution in all 48 lower states. So I've really been able to focus on my business. My wife is still working full time at another job.
Yeah.
So we have consistent income coming in. But without the support of my wife saying, yeah, let's go all in, and without the support of a lot of people in the turf industry,
yeah,
it probably probably wouldn't have happened, because I've been told no hundreds, if not thousands of times. I've been told it's a stupid idea, but I believed it wasn't. And now, with how hard it is to find good labor, with how high the seed prices are, people are starting to do a cost benefit analysis, and they're starting to realize Jeff's product isn't really as expensive as we originally thought. And it's nice to see all this hard work over the past several years come to fruition, and pretty excited for the future. It's been fun, but also a roller coaster ride at the same time. So.
I think it's interesting that you sort of mentioned, like you did, that it's almost your product is becoming cost effective, as you said. And I will refer back to Peter's podcast again, you know, within his sort of discussion about where have all the assistant supers gone, they touched on the fact that a lot of superintendents now are having to be very budget savvy, shall we say, you know, and analyze down to, you know, the merest of dollars, really. But what you have to bring into or factor into these considerations, like you said, with the cost of seed going up. So you might look at your product and think, wow, that's expensive. That's expensive to buy by the bag. But when you then bring into the fact that arrives on your door and then it goes out onto the golf course ready to go, you haven't got to send 2 members of the green staff out to mix a blend of products that you've got in from different. It just sort of ties in with potentially the way the industry's going, and people like you and there are other businesses out there that are focusing on making the life of a superintendent and everyone below him, making their life as easy as possible, which I think every industry wants to do. I mean, wherever you work in the world, if there are processes, procedures, machinery, if you like, that are going to make your job easier, surely that has to be the way forward, Jeff, doesn't it?
I think so. And my number one goal when I started this was to make lives easier and to make people's lives better. And, you know, we now have 2 products. One is sand peat moss grass seed. The other one's compost peat moss grass seed. So we were expanding into landscape municipalities, soil-based fields instead of just sand. And I think if you start a business with the focus on making people's lives easier instead of just completely focused on making money, you're typically going to be more successful, and the money will eventually come. And I think, you know, there's a company called Spray Caddy. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's just a magnetized wand and they have a thing that covers the hole. Yeah. And it prevents you from spraying color in your hole, or if you top dress, it prevents you from getting sand into the hole. And it's another assistant superintendent that did that, and it makes people's lives easier, right? And I think they're going to be quite successful because they have this same mindset. They know the industry, they know the issues, and they're making people's lives easier. And it's a simple tool, as you know, mine's a simple divot mix. Yeah. It makes your life easier. And it's really cool to see all these former superintendents or current superintendents coming out with these businesses. I know Paul used to be a superintendent at Greensboro. Yeah. And now has a fairly successful distribution company. And it's pretty nice to see all these people being successful. So, well, as a former irrigation tech for a period of 2 or 3 years, I'm still wanting and waiting for someone to come up with very similar ideas, what you just mentioned with the hole cups. I mean, I was forever campaigning for sprinkler heads around greens to be covered during top dressing operations. You know, obviously the head sits down, it's not up, but the amount of sand that then potentially gets down into the mechanics did bother me. The problem being, you know, with the back-to-backs, even over in the UK now, everyone's moving to back-to-back. So that's doubled the number of sprinkler heads. So potentially that's going to make me millions in years to come, maybe, Jeff. But I think you can do it.
until then, that is brilliant and fantastic news that, you know, you've gone from 5 states to 45, and you hope to get into the final, the other 3 for the non-island based ones, let's say. To finish the podcast, Jeff, you've talked us through, we've gone through the negative that was you got fired, but the positive that is Turfmend, and the huge positive is, you know, you've mentioned it twice, that the amazing support your wife has given you through this process. So I'd like to finish really with, it's something that we discussed off air, but it's something that I think is absolutely fantastic. You're now able to, you said you're able to take your kids to school and pick them up every day. How different is your day now in a positive sense to sort of back in those days when you were that busy assistant super or that busy super? Just sort of give us a little insight into that, how that affects your mindset. I mean, I don't get to drop my daughter off at school much. I pick her up every day. But it is fantastic being a family man. It's great, isn't it?
It's great. Now we have a 10-year-old, and then we have a 3-year-old, which was a big surprise, as I told you.
Yeah.
But you don't have much time where they want to actually spend time with you. And I think now that I can actually take advantage of that, I feel very, very blessed. I spend substantially more time with this one than I was able to with my older one. And now I can spend much more time with my older one. I help him with his homework every day.
Yeah.
You know, pick him up, drop him off for school. And I do take some trips where I need to go meet with distributors, but I try to be here 80-90% of the time.
Yeah.
It's far more than I was there when I was an assistant or when I was a superintendent. And I just feel blessed where I'm at. And I think we're going to continue to grow. I'm very excited about this. And, you know, I think I'm a better husband now. I'm here for my wife a lot more than I was. And I'm actually able to share the burden.
Yeah.
Do all the cooking. So, because I'm here before her, so I usually have dinner ready when she's home, and
yeah,
it just makes our marriage better, you know.
Fantastic. I mean, that is what a great way to sort of end our chat, Jeff. Fantastic. You know, I'm not sure what to title this chat. I had sort of risk reward in my head. It's just a successful story, isn't it? I mean, your story of getting fired from your job in golf, that's not an uncommon story. That's not uncommon in any industry. But what is fairly uncommon is for someone to deal with that low point by basically then moving on to the front foot, not letting the negativity affect them, and coming up with an idea that you knew was a good idea. But it's not always that easy, you know, putting that good idea and making it commercially viable, shall I say? But you were able to do so, and to grow.
It was really hard. Like, hopefully I didn't make it sound easy, because it took a lot of work.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of failures. I've been told no by probably hundreds of distributors.
Yeah.
But it just takes that first yes, and you can't let the no's bother you. Like, it's like a salesperson. If they say no, you just move on to the next one. So I was fortunate. I mean, Barenbrug, the team at Barenbrug USA has been very supportive. You know, they do all the blending, the bagging, shipping, and I can focus on growing the business. They've been there for me when I made my mistakes, and they help correct them. And James Snyder and his team are very good people. So
okay, well, what we'll do is we will certainly link the business. We will put a Barenbrug link up there. Go over and check out Jeff's Twitter, you know, and check out his business. Again, I'm going to finish. If you've enjoyed the content, please like, rate, and review this podcast. As I said before, you can support the podcast by clicking on our link to the buymeacoffee.com. I would just like to say thank you very much for joining me, Jeff. I wish you all the success in the future, and hopefully we can catch up for a chat again soon.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff. Cheers.
Yep.